I'm Shammer, and this is Grayman Part 2. We're going to discuss a little more specifics about a few items. We're going to talk about clothes, your body, money, how to use communications, emergency survival gear as it relates to a gray man, false evidence, and some lifestyle changes. These are, of course, your ideas. You can use at your free will. This is just the things you'd want to do if you want to get a little more hardcore. So, with clothing, you want to get used to the idea of wearing hats. The primary hats you want to start with are ball caps, relatively darker colors, like say a blue, that have no emblems, they're plain. The only time you would wear a hat, for example, with an emblem on it would be if you were moving in and out of a crowd at, say, a baseball game. Otherwise, moving in and around town, you just want a hat. Clothing. It's not a bad idea to have inside-out clothing, meaning, they sell those jackets or whatever, and then you can turn them inside out. Or even if it's not designed for that, it's one that if you did turn it inside out, it would look somewhat normal for a short period of time, so that while you're on the move, you could turn that inside out and still wear it to make a visual change. Because subconsciously, even if somebody identifies the mannerisms and physical appearance of an individual, they will still be drawn towards the colors and large designs that they see covering most of their body, which will be, of course, by their clothes. Layers are good, just like wearing layers to stay cool. You want layered clothing so you can strip items off as you move, if necessary, trash them or whatever, and make a change that way. Another thing about layers is you could, for example, be wearing, say, a common pair of shoes that are black maybe, and pants that are like those Dickie pants or carpenter pants or something that might be common like that you could see with a t-shirt, a polo, or with a tie. And you're wearing a shirt and tie with it, but over that shirt and tie you're wearing a sweatshirt that doesn't show the shirt and tie, or a jacket or something hiding it, so that you could be wearing a ball cap, say a jean jacket when people wore that shit, with a thin long sweater and these pants and shoes. Then you could ditch the hat, the jacket, and the long shirt showing a polo or a shirt and tie. Possibly then even throw on just a pair of glasses, and you just became a whole other person that you could probably walk by the person following you, unless they're a serious professional. They're not going to recognize you most likely. You need to always ensure that if you make changes, any socks that can be seen are appropriate to the clothing you're wearing. So if you're wearing a suit and slacks and a jacket and dress shoes and dress socks, you make a change down to shorts and a t-shirt, and you didn't bring other socks, and you wear your dress socks, unless you're 75 in Florida with a flowered shirt in a retirement community, you're probably going to stand out. Most of the clothing you wear shouldn't have any brand labels. It's understandable that some people by design of clothing can look at it and figure out who made it, but you don't want brand designs, embroidery, printing, or anything like that. Things that don't identify you from everybody else, unless, for example, again, you're at a rock concert or a sporting event, and things that can't be traced to a point of origin, so that they can research and see how recently it may have been bought, for example. The laundry labels you also want to remove, so that if you have to ditch things, they have to make an extra effort. If you ditch a t-shirt, leave a laundry label in there, and it's made by a company that primarily is only sold at, let's say, Walmart, for example. You've just done some work for them and given them one step closer to seeing where you obtained that. Now, maybe you bought it 2 years ago, but they're not going to know that. But if you frequent Walmarts, you've just given them a possibility of identifying who you are. Also, you want to make sure your clothing matches. Not matches like this color goes with that color, because that may not be what you want. Going back to the socks thing. Make sure your shoes and socks are always changed to match your clothing. Unless it's really, really common where you're at. You don't want to wear shitty ragged up t-shirts with slack type shorts and a dress belt and dress shoes. It just doesn't go together. So you want to make sure that matches. You also want to make sure that if you have a pair of shoes you can toss that are relatively common that you buy at Payless and people can tell they're cheap, that you're not wearing $300 Italian shirts with it, because that just won't match. In your body, if you have tattoos, you always have to take that in consideration if they can be seen. And if they can be seen based on how you're dressed. There's things you can do to cover those up, to hide them, to manipulate how they look. From a distance, depending on the type of tattoos you have, you might be able to use permanent marker to make some changes to give it a different appearance. Example might be there was a guy that had parts of a tattoo that were just cut in, the lines basically, the outline. Took a marker and colored a lot of it in to give a solid tattoo appearance. It could be identified from a distance. Once it's removed, it's very easy, unless you have other evidence to say, that's not the guy I'm looking for, because the other guy had a complete tattoo and you just can't pull ink out of your skin. If you have piercings, the more the merrier, I'm sure. Those need to be considered. The more holes you have in your face, the more ways you're going to be identified. So you need to always take that into consideration. You also need to factor in jewelry, the type of jewelry you wear. Rings, watches, piercings, necklaces, that type of thing. They need to be appropriate to what you're wearing if you're going to wear them. They need to be things that you can toss and not take a huge loss on. They shouldn't be a major attractor, like the attraction we talked about before. So it's really cool if you got a necklace and go to a concert and has some big glow-in-the-dark crystal on it, but if people start taking notice of that, you need to get rid of it. If you get 2 or more people in any one sitting, or maybe 3 or more in a week that notice the same item, that item no longer works for you. It's getting too much attention. So that needs to be considered. Your skin tone and tan lines. Always take into consideration skin tone and tan lines. Tan lines are a big indicator of how you spend your leisure time, where you might have been, or wherever. You could show up to the East Coast, Northeast, where a lot of people are white, with a tan from Arizona, but you might be able to tell them you're from anywhere. Or you might be able to tell them you're a different ethnicity depending on how well you tan. But then if they start seeing tan lines, well, that draws a different story. The things that are more important about tan lines, though, are the ones they don't think about, like your rings. Like in the military, we used to laugh all the time because women would go to bars and you'd see this big old rock on their right forefinger and a tan line on their left finger because they didn't want to lose the ring, but they want to play like they're not married. Don't get me wrong, if you get pissed about that statement, guys do it too. But if you wear rings, you need to do what you can to ensure those tan lines are minimal. A way to make that's a good idea for them is if you have a lot of time by yourself and you're not married, and you can get a cheap wedding ring or any type of ring and burn in a tan line over a series of few weeks, and then that throws people off to think that you have a significant other. Sometimes that could be to your benefit. But you need to consider that. People always look at your hands. While they're looking at your hands, they're also looking at your nails. There's a lot of things you can pull off with well manicured nails. But if you don't manicure your nails, which you don't have to, but you chew them or they're dirty a lot, you don't normally clean them, they're a little scuzzy, your cuticles are messed up, and you try to pull off a $2,000 Armani suit, something's not going to match up, and somebody's going to notice that. Because certain things are noticed in certain environments. And things like nails tend to get noticed by women. So for any guys out there, you need to take that in consideration. And it's understandable that depending on your line of work, you may not be able to do manicures. It may not last. You can learn to do some of that stuff on your own. It's not a requirement. It's just a consideration. I don't always keep mine manicured. Also, especially for ladies, the manicure needs to match your clothing. So if you do emo in your off time, and then you're going to play Grayman, but you got these black whatever crazy nails and eyeliner that looks like you got punched in the fucking face, but you're trying to pull off a business suit, it's probably not going to match up. So you need to keep that shit in mind. Scars and rashes need to be considered, and rashes can develop for all kinds of reasons, not just diseases. Maybe gluten's an issue, maybe too much sugar, maybe you got too much sun, maybe you got a sunburn. You got scars from surgery, scars from accidents, scars from knife wounds. Those are all identifying marks, need to be taken into consideration. You can also fake those things, which needs to be considered as well. Think about your body hair. Body hair can be shaven, so just consider what body hair you have. If you have long hair can be cut. That's to your benefit. If you have short hair, it can be cut shorter. If you have really short hair, it can be shaved. Your hair can also be dyed. You can dye it yourself right out of any little pharmacy, and you can do it relatively cheap, relatively quickly. Men can do the same thing with facial hair and head hair. Also, keep in mind your eyebrows, especially if they're dark. Unless it's really what you're going for, a lot of people will go from black to blonde and forget their eyebrows, and that will stand out bigger than anything, like a black crayon on a white sheet. People will notice it. Also, shaving. If you shave, especially men or ladies, if your legs are exposed, shaving nicks and cuts are noticeable. Yeah, they go away in a couple of days, but it is another identifying mark that can be seen. And for men, it's more identifiable because people tend to look you in the face. You need to think about things like lotions, aftershaves, perfumes, and colognes. They have scents. So, if you're going to utilize those items with the scent, they need to be scents that would be common to your environment or common to your gender in that area or popular at the time. So, I don't know much about women's stuff. I know about guys, but like I have some Creed cologne. It's noticeable because it smells good. It's a quality cologne, but it's not common, so I wear it selectively. But I have like some Aqua di Gio that I keep that I use regularly that a lot of guys use. It's been around for a few years. Deodorant and antiperspirant, same thing. You want to use common brands that are easy to get a hold of, depending on what their scents are, and make sure scents match the time of year. You know, if you're wearing some crazy fruity stuff in the middle of winter, that goes noticed sometimes. So it's just something to look at. Dental hygiene is important. If you got jacked up teeth, they're a little bit more noticeable. If you got perfect teeth that have been bleached, that's also noticeable. Not that either one of those are necessarily bad things, just things to consider. Whether or not you brush your teeth goes noticed. Whether or not you clean your tongue goes noticed. Any dental work that can be seen or even possibly seen if you laugh with your mouth open wide can be noticed. Those are all things you need to consider. Also consider your mouthwash and toothpaste and how long those smells last. Same thing. That's a consideration. So there's all your body stuff. Those are a lot of things to look at, and they just need to be remembered and considered on a regular basis while you're living your life as a gray man. So, while we're doing the gray man, let's talk about money. Two forms of money you primarily want to use: prepaid credit cards and small bill cash. The most common bills in usage are 20s and 1s. That's what most people have. After that, it's $5 bills. 10s are still found. 50s are almost uncommon. And 100s are common in Vegas and around casinos, but in a lot of places they're not that common unless you're eating at high-end restaurants paying cash. So you need to keep that in consideration. It's in your benefit to have 20s and 1s and maybe some 5s. Multiple denominations for those prepaid cards. Not just prepaid credit cards, but prepaid gift cards to restaurants that you're going to frequent. That's less of a way to track you. And now, Now, you might be thinking, well, those cards can be tracked. Well, they can. A couple things you need to look at. One is when you make these purchases, if you're really serious about this, you purchase only one item at a time. You purchase them all in different stores, preferably in stores you don't frequent, preferably in other states, or at least a couple of counties away. You save them up, and you don't use anything that's not at least 6 months old, and you use the older ones first. So that way, if something happens and law enforcement or whoever gets involved and they're able to get the information that you use this credit card or gift card at this restaurant thinking it's you, and they run that, all they identify is, if they even can track it, that it's 6 to 9 months old and it was bought in this other state whenever the hell you were there, and there's no way they're going to have cameras for it. Also, you try to use them only one time. So if you got a $25 card and a $15 meal, you need to write that $10 off. If you don't think it would be normal to put $10 in a tip in that situation, you put a normal one in there. Then, when you get the card back, you always take the card, you never leave it there, and you do one of two things. One, whether it's useful or not, you give it to a homeless person in a whole other location that might try to use it, and they will be connected to that card. The other thing is to discard it. Preferably you burn it and melt it in a location not near you that you wouldn't normally frequent, that you can easily get rid of a melted pile of plastic as evidence, and you never burn more than one together. The other thing you can do is discard it in the trash. If you discard it in the trash, I wouldn't cut it up. Leave it whole. If somebody finds it and they try to use it, they're now connected to it. You want to discard things, and we'll talk about more things to discard. You want to discard them in locations you do not normally frequent in a manner that wouldn't go noticed. Discard only one thing at a time. Discard them at stores you would never go to. Always try to do it in the dumpster versus indoors. And you want to do it in different towns, in different locations, in places you don't go often. So it's fine if you go to Safeway, but if you're going to burn something at Safeway, you need to burn it. Burn it meaning thrown away. You need to burn that item in Safeway 3 or 4 hours away that you wouldn't normally go. And if you're going to keep them to dispose of them on that vacation, if that vacation's coming up in a week or two, that's fine. But if it's 6 months away, you don't want to save that stuff up. That's just a trail that somebody could get a hold of. Communications. Best way to communicate is to use burner phones. Burner phones are prepaid phones, no contracts, that are disposable phones. You acquire and dispose of them in the same manner as prepaid credit cards, with the exception of you disassemble those phones and throw the parts away in different areas. Recycle the batteries, not for the environment, but because it's easier for them to get recycled, destroyed, and you not have to worry about it. And if anybody tries to find that battery, it's going to be in a big pile of hundreds or thousands, or however it gets done. And then, while you can transfer memory cards, if you're not going to use them anymore, you need to melt them, and you need to never connect them to an internet or device that's connected to the internet in any way, whether wireless or hardwired. Which means your burner phone should be a flip phone dial that doesn't even really use the internet, just used to make calls. Your SIM card is the same thing. Yeah, there's ways you can use a SIM card, change it in between phones if you know how to do that to throw people off your track. It's harder and you have to do some practice at it more than anything else we've talked about at this point. It's better to just destroy it. Melt that card like you would a credit card and toss it in some other, or in the same type of manner as destroying those cards that we talked about. Your phones also need to be used in the same intervals. You slowly build them up. Try to use ones that are 6 months or older, that you've bought in different towns or states, different locations you wouldn't normally frequent. And you never frequent the same place twice if you can do it. So if you found a Safeway 3 hours away in another state and you made a purchase of a $25 Visa card, you're not going to go back there and buy any other card ever again, unless it's at least a year later. And you're not going to buy a phone from there. And you're preferably not going to buy another item in that town unless it's a large town. It's overkill, but it's to ensure that there's no other channels, avenues, or paths they can follow and find anything. They don't know what to follow, but if they follow it and find something, they could slowly start to get on your trail. Don't want to do that. All these purchases you make wearing cover clothes. Cover clothes meaning that hat where they can't see you. Clothes you wouldn't normally wear, but you look normal in at the time. Those are things that throw people off. I've known people that have worn facial hair like beards, changed their clothing, their whole outlook, and shaved it off completely for a few days, make the skin tone even out, go and make their purchases and grow their beard back over the next couple of months. So it depends on what your need is and how committed you are to it. Another thing about phones. When disposing of phones if possible, but definitely when using phones, you want to avoid cameras. When you're using your phones, the best thing to do is use them outdoors, not indoors. And when you're using outdoors, you want to do them outdoors, out of view of cameras. So you can go into the back of a mall somewhere that's not near a loading dock where there's no cameras and make a call, but you only want to do it that one time, never do it again. Whether or not you see anybody, you might go noticed. And if they notice you, no big deal. They see a guy on a phone. You go back there even a few weeks or a couple months later, same person's working, they might just be like, oh, I think I've seen that before. Maybe not the same guy, but I saw that. That's too much attention. So that's how you use the phones. Not always can happen, but best you can do. If you have to visit another place, again, you want to wait at least 6 months, preferably 9. Change your clothing, your outfit, your mannerisms, your vehicle, everything about it, and do it in a slightly different location around the same area. So there's a few ideas in communications. Your evasion gear. Things you might want to keep on hand and have availability if you go on the move. One is some form of scissors, cut your hair. If you're going to use clippers to shave or shave your facial hair, you want to use battery operated clippers so you can use them on the move and you don't have to find an outlet. Having any sort of hair dye on hand, or even things to dye your hair with that aren't professional hair dye, like when people do it with Kool-Aid and bleach and all these other things. A knife or small razor and a suture kit. Crazy as this sounds, self-inflicted wound with stitches, especially if you learn how to give stitches, is a self-identifying mark that can throw people off. Where you can tell them if they for some reason want to talk to you, you were at whatever emergency room you walked out, you don't have insurance, they can check the cameras. Total lie, but it throws them off in a different direction if you get into a bind. There's things to deal with about that if somebody's that serious and you got blood or whatever somewhere and they find the blood and test it, sure, but that's one option in a training scenario that was discussed. A few basic medicinal supplies. If you're going to carry around something to do self-inflicted wounds or alterations to your body, you need to have the basic medicines and sanitation things there to take care of it. You'll need to discard those in different locations other than wherever you do your treatment of whatever it is. Reading glasses and sunglasses. You have 2 to 3 different pairs of those. They should be somewhat common, but each one of them should be different from the other, and so that they can match with certain types of outfits, especially reading glasses. And you can get reading glasses that have little or absolutely no alteration whatsoever, so that you can wear them and not have any issue. Also, whenever you toss glasses, if you're going to toss glasses, you absolutely must clean those lenses. It's preferable to do it with a solution to ensure you're getting down in the grooves where the glass meets the plastic. So even if you wipe the whole dang thing down and pull fingerprints off, if you wore it enough that you got facial grease, grime, skin flakes, or whatever in there, and people are real serious about it, whoever's after you, they can do things like DNA samples. So you try to sanitize those as much as possible because of all the things, glasses will get the most items on them. You should have 2 or more baseball caps or very common hats of darker colors that would go with whatever you're wearing. Probably 1 or 2 beanies if they're worn in your area or for the time of year. And you should probably keep a belt. A common dress type belt or belt people would wear with jeans if they're doing it in your area. Even if you don't wear it, you can use a belt as a tool. Okay, false evidence. False evidence is evidence you can plant on your trail to throw people off. An example is matchbooks all come with a label on them from the business they were at. So while you're out of state or out of county buying one card over here and a phone over here, you stop by a casino or a business and get a matchbook or 2. Rip 3 or 4 matches out of it. Don't have to use it. Save that matchbook. You can drop that matchbook where necessary. Even leave it in a hotel room if you're being followed to a place you haven't been, or when you picked it up was about 6 months or more prior, and it can look to anybody as though you're traveling. It could even be a situation where you leave a couple of items in a room, somebody comes by, all the stuff's gone, the room's been cleaned, but the house cleaner saw it and said, you know, I saw this pen and this matchbook in there, I kept the pen, but there's from these locations that are from a total another direction of where you were at. Indicates you were out of state, could indicate to them or suggest you might go back that way, but you haven't been there in 6 months and have no intention on going back. You can do that with matchbooks and pens from businesses. And if they coincide with each other to some reasonable distance that makes sense, that can actually help. Another thing you can use are receipts. You want receipts found in trash that you didn't use, don't have credit cards numbers on them, they're paid with cash. Especially the portion you can keep, most people don't sign, so there's no signature on there, and it's better to get it at a place that you've checked out that has probably no cameras or minimal cameras, so the odds of them determining who actually used that if they look it up is minimal, and that you could have been there. Another thing you can use is old key cards from hotels. You can usually pick those up, run by a hotel, look in the trash can. Sometimes you can go by old Motel 6s, people have the doors open when they walk out and go in and jack the key to keep with you. You can drop those. You can use those as drop items. Things you never want to use are any food item or container, any medical item or container, any drink item or container, or cigarette butts. All those will be looked at for DNA. Okay, so yeah, they find fingerprints and DNA and it's not used. It don't take long to find fingerprints, and DNA doesn't take as long as people think. If they start finding too many things that indicate other random people that aren't consistent, they're going to know that you're dropping items. And that actually helps them. So you don't want them to know you're dropping items. You want them to find items that are dead ends for immediate physical identification that forces them to do surveillance, reconnaissance, or get other assets to go to another area to look for you, like that matchbook from the casino in another state. A couple other items you can get. Hair samples you can keep in small bags from cats or dogs or other innocuous people that you don't know, especially if they're in the area. That's a pretty serious move, but that and dirt samples from other areas so that you can have them in the carpet or beat up in some old shoe you accidentally left in a hotel room where they go, oh, there's that shoe, that tread matches, there's dirt in there, let's sample it, and they determine it comes from this other area that matches the pin you threw in the trash and the matchbook you dropped. All of a sudden they have coordinating evidence to go a whole nother direction. Lifestyle changes. Lifestyle changes to look at is having post office boxes, no at-home deliveries. You'll probably still get junk mail, that's good. People can see you going to your mailbox and getting it. It's not always noticeable that the mailman doesn't stop at your place, especially if it's the big kiosk in a housing development where you all walk up and open your little box, which you don't really want. So when you get post office boxes, first thing you want is 2 post office boxes in 2 different post offices. So 1 post office box in your town and 1 post office box in another town you can get to relatively easily for special items, or we'll get into other reasons why you use it here in a second. 3 bank accounts. You have 1 bank account for your regular normal income you get now that you use to establish your normal pattern of life that you plan and develop for buying groceries, getting gas, or however you choose to do it. And that is one of your bank accounts. That bank account is not to be connected to the other 2, not to have deposits, withdrawals, not to be the same bank. Another one that you're going to have is your alternate pattern of life. That alternate pattern of life, that bank, most likely you want to have near that other post office box. Even though it doesn't take much to identify where it goes, you have a separate pattern of life you can establish that you can use for other reasons, other times, once or twice a week, or just for specific things. Like maybe you just use it for gas and fast food, and that looks somewhat normal, and you do it in a reasonable distance, not within that town, but not always consistently in the same area unless it's in the same town. Your third bank is your cash bank. You can make a large check deposit that you get from somebody other than yourself who's not a family member or your work, or maybe you just have cash you can deposit in there and use it solely for cash withdrawals when you need it. That bank needs to be a common bank in common areas that you can get to. And so far, just so you know, these banks should not all be co-located, meaning in the same area. And that's your cash bank. There is a 4th bank you would get, but you wouldn't use it for a bank account. That would be for your safety deposit box. Your safety deposit box and your alternate lifestyle account should be at that secondary post office location in that other town. That town should be at least an hour away, preferably in another state. So yeah, you get all these bank accounts now. So how much fun is that? So post office, alternate account, safety deposit box, alternate lifestyle, all in one location. Regular post office box, primary lifestyle account, physical address, all in one location. Cash account, you open that up at a bank that's nowhere near you, maybe when you're on vacation, using an old home address because you don't care where they mail their stuff. And then you can use that cash account wherever you go on the run throughout the country. Eventually it can catch on to it, but you only use it when you need to. Your safety deposit box doesn't have to be co-located in any of those necessarily, but it can be. If it is, it's during your alternate one. Okay, when you're getting cash, you don't want to use ATMs. They got cameras. You try to always get cash indoors, although they have cameras too. If you dress the right way, establish a pattern, recon it by realizing that a lot of banks are set up the same way. So just recon banks you're not ever going to use. Get a general idea where the cameras are. You can, with a little practice, actually cover your identity fairly well, or for the most part, while using a bank. Of course, you don't look like you're, scouting the bank out and going to rob it. That's attention you definitely don't want. Every bank account's going to have a different email account from a different server. So if you use Gmail, use that for one bank. Use something like mail.com or some common thing people don't use for another bank. If you like Mac computers, use a Mac account for another bank. Use MSN, Live, something else for another bank. You try your best, with the exception of your primary lifestyle account, to never log into your bank account and only check it through the emails they send you online and never respond to anything. If you need to verify information, it's better to call in from a burner phone. If you want to get real serious, from a whole other location. And even call into, if you want to call Chase Bank and that's your bank, don't call Chase in your town. I live in Arizona, I'd call Chase in like Virginia, Maine, Florida. Be like, oh, whatever, can you tell me what, use their computer system, type in your information, and get your balances or whatever. And the funny thing is, if they don't have much information on you and they realize you called a place in Florida and you've never been there, a common thought is, if you're going to call the bank, you're either going to look up the National 800 number or you're just going to look for that bank in your town, because that's just the subconscious reaction. They might think you were there. It's another way to throw them off. And all these things we've talked about so far, that locations like where to toss your discard items, where to burn items as far as light them on fire, burn items is throw them away, where you're going to go to dye your hair, cut it, where you're going to go use your phone. All these places need to be pre-established on a recon with a fairly good understanding where they are. And you also, after you look at this long list of stuff, you build these in to those false patterns of life that you pre-established that we talked about before, where you can initiate a pattern that looks normal, and along the way you can do these items, so that if it looks normal for you to go into Sears for half an hour and they're not going to necessarily follow you, you can go in and use their bathroom for something, or go in and discard something. So this is how it gets really fun. Hope you enjoyed it. Probably be some more coming.